Do you constantly feel uncomfortable and strange in your own skin? Are you searching for answers but can't ever seem to find them? Do you get lost in the books you read and the stories you consume? Then this novel might be for you. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to Autistic BookTube. I'm your toast, him. Today we're talking about Gabriel Smith's novel BRAT and what will be the first installment of Fancy Little Craft Shit, a series I'm starting to highlight interesting and autistically resonant writerly choices by interesting and resonant writerly types. Now, as far as I can tell, Gabriel Smith isn't autistic. He does have ADHD, which I know because he said so in an interview. Nice. But the point of Fancy Little Craft Shit isn't necessarily that the authors are outies. I'm looking for craft moves in fiction that feel atypical or non-conforming in some way, or something that's simply striking and feels relevant to how my atypical brain functions. So a bit of background. BRAT is Smith's first novel. He's a young writer from London. Parents were writers. Grandmother was distantly related to Jane Austen, though maybe that was a joke in the interview I read. You can read some great stuff from him in The Drift, which is a great magazine. Anyway, what you get with BRAT in particular is a character whose dad has just died and whose girlfriend has left him, and obviously he's grieving on multiple fronts. He's set up in his childhood home where he's tasked with cleaning out the house so it can be sold. He's a writer who's lying to his agent about how much of his next book he's written. Spoiler, none. Actually, it has some real alt-lit dude vibes with its flatness and kind of quiet poetics and autofiction qualities. Think like Tao Lin or Jordan Castro. Not that any of that matters. The hero is also losing his skin though, like big sheets of it, as the house loses its paint and like siding, the roof tiles. His mom is demented and in a care home, and he finds one of her old manuscripts, a novel that she wrote or was writing, which keeps changing and increasingly includes details from his own current day-to-day life. So it's odd and eerie, and everything's reflecting off of everything else, but try as he might, he can't find the answers that he seeks. And that's the thing about this book, because in a way, nothing really happens. It's a constant mystery, and there's really kind of a resistance baked into the language, like it doesn't want to progress anywhere. I mean, check out this first paragraph. I was in the waiting room. Then I was in the examination room. There was a chair and another chair and a hydraulic doctor bed. Sit down, the doctor said. I didn't know where. Not on the bed, he said. I sat on a chair. I think that kind of staccato rhythm could feel too flat for people, or like too stuck in its own grief. Like there's so little psychological interiority both here and throughout the book. But the trick of the novel, as I see it, is that it's a comment on what's beneath the flat affect, and that's where we get into the autistic vibes it's giving off for me. It reminds me a lot of the stories I was writing in my MFA program, in fact, years before I knew I was autistic. I wrote this one in particular that will always stand out for me because of how editors responded to it negatively, in which a single dad spends all of 20 pages taking his son to different schools trying to sign him up because he got kicked out of his last one for going into the girls' bathroom over and over again. And by the end, the son isn't signed up anywhere and nothing is really resolved, and the dad himself has stumbled into a girls' bathroom too. And finally they go home. One thing editors said about this story was that nothing happened. But for me, it felt like too much was happening, that there was conflict everywhere and all the time. And for that reason, it struck me as a quintessentially autistic story. The characters aren't sure how to manage their affairs or fit into the bureaucracy of normative life. There's a constant accumulation of thoughts and sensory complications and difficult tasks. There's no real resolution or conclusion or change. And it's not only mental and emotional, but also embodied as well. Probably the chapter that foregrounds this type of autistic story most for me in BRAT is when the narrator reads a story published in Guernica, a real magazine, by his ex-girlfriend. In that story, we get a portrait of a Russian oligarch who likes to masturbate and ejaculate onto paintings of people. Yeah. And it's a genuine engagement with the art, actually. Like, it's dirty, but also beautiful. It's not written as some terrible, perverted performance. It's ugly in its way, but it's not salacious or disgusting ever. The dude's aimed at something human, a human experience. And so what's striking in this chapter is the layering that's going on here. You have the Russian trying to interact with a piece of art. You have the ex-girlfriend who's doing the same with the writing of the story. You have the narrator of BRAT doing the same with the ex-girlfriend's story. And you have you, the reader, doing the same with BRAT. And for all the flatness of the novel and also the story in Guernica, you have also this denseness of interpretation and image and connection and love and grief. Those are never really separate, are they? I mean, the Russian oligarch story doesn't have much happen either, and yet everything happens. A whole life does. Feels a lot like Chekhov to me, but I don't know. It is, at any rate, just good. It's good and compelling writing that moreover is impetus for self-reflection. Because what are we bringing to what we read? Hopefully not ejaculate. But what expectations do we have? What is the balance between beauty and ugliness that we offer and use to fill in whatever holes of whatever text we're consuming or interacting with? Anyway, it feels like a good example of what I mean when I say a piece of fiction can function autistically, maybe even without being autistic explicitly. This kind of nothing happening when nothing is ever actually available feels like autistic life to me, where every moment is full. It's no wonder the protagonist in BRAT is constantly, almost on every page, like in every chapter, remarking that he feels that he's being watched. Relatable, right? Like, how much extra watching do you get when you're disabled or autistic but struggle to mask? This novel is about loss and grief and trauma, which autistics are more likely to experience than their non-autistic counterparts. There's a lot to the story, honestly, but like most neurodivergent folks, the richness requires a little investment, and to me it's worth it. Full disclosure though, here at the end of the video, I've not finished the book yet. Maybe everything I've said up till now will be canceled out in the final act, I don't know. But who cares, I'm enjoying it. Anyway, that's it for today's fancy little craft shit. Thank you again for being here. If you've made it this far, check out the book if it feels right to you. And if you liked the video, of course, subscribe and give me a little like there. And stay tuned for next time for another fine little book list I've put together. Goodbye. Please don't jack off on the book.